Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Gustavo's sat hunched over his desk, fingers hovering hesitantly above the keyboard. His dark eyes darted back and forth, scanning the forum thread before him. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a reminder of another late night spent in the comforting embrace of the digital world. Gustavo's fingers trembled slightly as he began to type, pouring out his thoughts and feelings to strangers on the internet. It was easier this way, safer. In the real world, he felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, always a step out of sync with those around him. But here, in this virtual space, he could be himself, or at least the version of himself he was slowly beginning to understand. I don't know how to explain it, he typed, pausing to consider his words carefully. It's like I'm wearing a costume every day, playing a role that doesn't feel right. Does anyone else feel this way? He hit send and waited, heart pounding. Responses trickled in, each one a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. People shared their own experiences, offered words of encouragement, and provided resources that made Gustavo's head spin. Gender identity, expression, dysphoria, terms he'd heard before but never truly understood, suddenly took on new meaning. As the night wore on, Gustavo found himself diving deeper into this new world of information. He read personal accounts that resonated with his own feelings, studied terminology that gave name to his experiences, and marveled at the diversity of gender expression he encountered. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. The first rays of sunlight were creeping through the blinds when Gustavo finally tore himself away from the computer. He stumbled to bed, mind reeling with newfound knowledge and possibilities. As he drifted off to sleep, a small spark of hope flickered to life in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone after all. Over the next few weeks, Gustavo found himself spending more and more time online, seeking out communities and individuals who shared his experiences. He created anonymous accounts, cautiously dipping his toes into discussions and sharing bits of his own story. With each interaction, he felt a little braver, a little more understood. One evening, while browsing an online marketplace, Gustavo's eye was caught by a delicate silver necklace. It was nothing ostentatious, just a simple chain with a small feminine pendant. His cursor hovered over the Add to Cart button as he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Want, fear, excitement, shame. Taking a deep breath, Gustavo clicked the button. It was just a necklace, he told himself. No one had to know. But as he completed the purchase, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just taken a significant step on a journey he didn't fully understand. The package arrived a few days later, innocuous in its plain brown wrapper. Gustavo's hands shook as he opened it, carefully lifting out the necklace. The metal was cool against his skin as he fastened it around his neck, and he found himself holding his breath as he turned to look in the mirror. The person staring back at him looked different, softer somehow. The necklace nestled in the hollow of his throat, a small but unmistakable touch of femininity. Gustavo's heart raced as he studied his reflection, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. It felt right in a way he couldn't explain, like a piece of a puzzle finally sliding into place. From that moment, something shifted in Gustavo. He began to pay more attention to his appearance, making small, subtle changes. He grew out his hair, experimenting with different styles. He started moisturizing, taking better care of his skin. Each small act of self-care felt like a tiny rebellion against the role he'd been playing for so long. Online shopping became a secret indulgence. Gustavo curated a hidden wardrobe of feminine clothes tucked away in the back of his closet. Soft sweaters, flowing skirts, delicate blouses, each item carefully chosen and cherished. He would try them on in the privacy of his room, reveling in the way they made him feel. In these moments, alone with his reflection, Gustavo felt a sense of rightness he'd never experienced before. But the outside world remained unchanged. By day, Gustavo continued to present as he always had, a quiet, somewhat awkward man who kept to himself. He went to work, interacted with colleagues and acquaintances, all the while feeling like he was wearing a mask that grew heavier by the day. The strain of living this double life began to take its toll. Gustavo found himself withdrawing even further from social interactions, preferring the safety of his online communities and his private moments of self-expression. He knew he couldn't go on like this forever, but the thought of revealing his true self to the world filled him with paralyzing fear. One night, after a particularly difficult day of pretending, Gustavo fell into a fitful sleep. In his dreams, he found himself standing on a stage, spotlights blinding him. He was wearing the clothes he usually hid away, a flowing dress that hugged his body, makeup that accentuated his features. The audience was a blur of faces, watching, waiting. In the dream, Gustavo felt a surge of panic. He wanted to run, to hide, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice called out, "It's okay, you can do this, we accept you." The words echoed through the dreamscape, growing louder and more numerous. Soon, the entire audience was chanting, "We accept you, we accept you." The fear began to melt away, replaced by a warmth that spread through Gustavo's entire being. He lifted his arms, embracing the acceptance, reveling in the freedom to be himself. Gustavo woke with a start, heart pounding. The dream clung to him, its message resonating in his soul. He sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair as he tried to make sense of the swirling emotions inside him. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by something else, a determination he'd never felt before. With trembling hands, Gustavo reached for his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, pausing on the name of his closest friend, Miguel. They'd known each other since college, and while they didn't see each other as often as they used to, Miguel had always been someone Gustavo could trust. Before he could talk himself out of it, Gustavo hit the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Gustavo was about to hang up when Miguel's sleepy voice came through the speaker. "Gustavo! It's 3 a.m, man. Everything okay?" Gustavo took a deep breath. I need to talk to you. Can we meet tomorrow? It's important." There must have been something in Gustavo's voice that conveyed the gravity of the situation, because Miguel's tone immediately shifted from groggy to concerned. "Of course, buddy. How about that coffee shop near your place? Say, noon? Yeah, that works. Thanks, Miguel, and I'm sorry for waking you." "Don't worry about it. That's what friends are for, right? See you tomorrow?" As Gustavo ended the call, a mix of relief and terror washed over him. There was no going back now. Tomorrow, he would take the first step towards living authentically, towards being the person he'd been hiding for so long. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Gustavo's mind. He stood in front of his closet, staring at the clothes he usually wore. Muted colors, shapeless shirts, unremarkable jeans. His gaze drifted to the back of the closet where his true self hung hidden away. With shaking hands, Gustavo reached for a soft powder blue sweater he'd ordered weeks ago but never dared to wear outside. He paired it with his usual jeans, a compromise between his 2 worlds. The necklace, his first step on this journey, found its place around his neck. As he looked in the mirror, Gustavo barely recognized himself. The person staring back at him looked right. Scared, yes, but also more alive than he'd ever felt before. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The walk to the coffee shop felt like the longest journey of Gustavo's life. Each step was a battle against the urge to turn back, to retreat into the safety of his familiar facade. But the memory of his dream, of that feeling of acceptance, pushed him forward. Miguel was already there when Gustavo arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming cups of coffee. His eyebrows raised slightly as he took in Gustavo's appearance, but he said nothing, simply gesturing for his friend to sit. "So," Miguel said after a moment of silence, "what's going on, Gus? You had me worried with that late-night call." Gustavo's hands wrapped around the warm coffee mug, seeking comfort in its solidity. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. The words he'd rehearsed all morning seemed to have abandoned him. I don't know how to say this, he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Miguel leaned in, his face a picture of concern. Hey, it's okay. Whatever it is, you can tell me. We've been friends for how long now? The genuine care in Miguel's voice gave Gustavo the courage he needed. He took a deep breath and, staring into his coffee, began to speak. I've been struggling with something for a long time. My whole life, really. I've always felt different, like I didn't fit in my own skin, and recently I've started to understand why. Gustavo's voice trembled as he continued, the words tumbling out faster now. I don't think I'm the person everyone sees me as. Inside, I think I'm a woman, Miguel. I know it sounds crazy, but... Whoa. Miguel interrupted gently, reaching out to place a hand on Gustavo's arm. Slow down, okay? Take a breath. Gustavo looked up, bracing himself for disgust or rejection. Instead, he saw only compassion in his friend's eyes. This isn't crazy, Gus, and it explains a lot, actually. I always felt like there was something you were holding back. Miguel's voice was soft, reassuring. Thank you for trusting me with this. It must have been really hard to keep it to yourself for so long. The acceptance in Miguel's words broke something open inside Gustavo. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he found himself telling Miguel everything about his online explorations, his secret wardrobe, the constant feeling of living a lie. Miguel listened attentively, asking questions here and there, but never judging. As Gustavo's story wound down, Miguel sat back in his chair, processing everything he'd heard. So, he said after a moment, what do you want to do now? Have you thought about transitioning? Gustavo shook his head. I don't know. The idea terrifies me. What if people reject me? What if I lose my job? What if... Hey, Miguel cut in. One step at a time, okay? You don't have to figure everything out right now. But I want you to know something. He leaned forward, making sure he had Gustavo's full attention. You're my friend. That doesn't change, no matter how you identify or present yourself. I'm here for you, whatever you decide. The weight of Miguel's acceptance washed over Gustavo like a warm wave. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt truly seen and understood. The road ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges he could barely imagine, but in that moment, Gustavo knew he wasn't alone. As they left the coffee shop, Miguel pulled Gustavo into a tight hug. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. And hey, that sweater looks good on you. Gustavo laughed through his tears, feeling lighter than he had in years. The future was still unclear, but for the first time, it also held hope. Over the following weeks, Gustavo found himself opening up more, both to Miguel and to himself. With his friend's encouragement, he began to explore what living authentically might look like. They spent hours researching together, learning about hormone therapy, legal name changes, and the myriad other aspects of transitioning. Miguel became Gustavo's confidant and ally, offering support and a listening ear whenever doubts or fears threatened to overwhelm him. He even accompanied Gustavo on his first trip to a gender therapist, waiting patiently in the lobby and treating his friend to ice cream afterward to celebrate this milestone. As Gustavo's confidence grew, so did his desire to express his true self more openly. He started small, wearing his feminine clothes around the house, then on quick errands to the grocery store or gas station. Each outing was a mix of terror and exhilaration, but the feeling of rightness that came with presenting as his authentic self was addictive. One Saturday afternoon, as they were hanging out in Gustavo's apartment, Miguel broached a subject they'd been dancing around for weeks. Have you thought about telling your family? Gustavo's hand froze midway to his mouth, the slice of pizza he'd been about to eat, forgotten. I don't know if I can, he admitted, setting the pizza back down on his plate. You know how traditional they are. What if they disown me? Miguel nodded sympathetically. I get it, I do, but Gus, they love you. Maybe they'll surprise you. And even if they don't react well at first, they might come around given time. Gustavo sighed, running a hand through his hair, which had grown long enough to brush his shoulders. You're right. I know you're right. It's just scary. Of course it is, Miguel agreed. But you don't have to do it alone. I'll be right there with you if you want me to be. The offer brought tears to Gustavo's eyes. Thanks, Miguel. I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably eat a lot less pizza, Miguel quipped, lightening the mood. They both laughed, the tension broken for the moment. As the weeks turned into months, Gustavo continued to make progress on his journey. He started hormone therapy, watching with a mix of wonder and trepidation as his body slowly began to change. He grew more comfortable presenting as female in public, though he still struggled with the fear of being clocked or harassed. Work presented its own set of challenges. Gustavo hadn't come out to his colleagues yet, and maintaining his male persona for 8 hours a day was becoming increasingly difficult. He found himself withdrawing at the office, avoiding social interactions and counting the minutes until he could go home and be himself. It was during one of these difficult days at work that Gustavo received a text from Miguel. Hey, got plans for Friday night? There's somewhere I want to take you. Intrigued and grateful for the distraction, Gustavo replied, No plans. What did you have in mind? It's a surprise, came Miguel's cryptic response. Just wear something you feel comfortable in. I'll pick you up at 8. As Friday night approached, Gustavo found himself growing both excited and nervous. He trusted Miguel implicitly, but the idea of going somewhere unknown, potentially in feminine attire, set his anxiety on edge. After much deliberation, Gustavo decided to embrace the opportunity. He chose a simple black dress that hugged his curves, helped along by the strategically placed padding he'd become adept at using, paired with low heels and subtle makeup. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself, and yet he'd never felt more like himself. At precisely 8 p.m., Miguel's car pulled up outside. Gustavo took a deep breath, grabbed his purse, and headed out. Miguel's eyes widened appreciatively as Gustavo slid into the passenger seat. Wow, Gus, you look amazing. Gustavo blushed, still unused to such compliments. Thanks. So, are you going to tell me where we're going? Miguel just grinned and put the car in drive. You'll see. They drove for about 20 minutes, leaving the familiar streets of their neighborhood behind. Finally, Miguel pulled into a parking lot in front of a nondescript building. A small rainbow flag in the window was the only indication that this wasn't just another bar. Is this... Gustavo trailed off, realization dawning. Miguel nodded. It's an LGBTQ-friendly club. I thought it might be good for you to be around people who understand what you're going through. Plus, it might be fun to actually enjoy a night out for once. Gustavo felt a rush of affection for his friend, mixed with a healthy dose of apprehension. I don't know, Miguel. What if... Nope, no what-ifs tonight, Miguel interrupted gently. You look beautiful, you're with a friend, and everyone in there is just looking to have a good time. No pressure, okay? If you're uncomfortable, we leave. Simple as that. Taking a deep breath, Gustavo nodded. Okay, let's do this. As they entered the club, Gustavo was immediately struck by the atmosphere. The music was loud, but not overwhelming, the lighting low and colorful. But what really caught his attention was the crowd. People of all genders and expressions mingled freely, laughing, dancing, just being themselves without fear or shame. Miguel led them to the bar, ordering drinks and finding a spot where they could observe the scene. Gustavo sipped his cocktail nervously, eyes darting around the room. He felt simultaneously out of place and right at home. So, what do you think? Miguel had to raise his voice slightly to be heard over the music. It's overwhelming, Gustavo admitted, but in a good way, I think. As the night progressed, Gustavo found himself relaxing. He and Miguel chatted, people watched, and even ventured onto the dance floor for a few songs. For the first time in public, Gustavo felt free to move and express himself without fear of judgment. It was during one of these dancing sessions that Gustavo locked eyes with someone across the floor. She was tall, with close-cropped hair and a dazzling smile. As the song ended, she made her way over. "Hi," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "I'm Zoe. I hope this isn't too forward, but I just wanted to say you look gorgeous tonight." Gustavo felt his face heat up, a mixture of pleasure and panic coursing through him. Thank you," he managed, his voice higher than usual. "I'm Gus. Greta." The name slipped out without thought, feeling right in a way his birth name never had. Zoe's smile widened. "Well, Greta, it's lovely to meet you. Is this your first time here?" As Gustavo, now Greta, nodded, Miguel appeared at her side, a supportive presence. "It is," he confirmed. "I'm Miguel, Greta's friend." "Well, welcome," Zoe said enthusiastically. "This place was a lifesaver for me when I first started transitioning. Everyone here is super friendly and supportive." The word transitioning hung in the air, and Greta felt a moment of panic. Was it that obvious? But Zoe's open, accepting demeanor helped calm her fears. "Thank you," Greta said, finding her voice. It's all very new to me." Zoe nodded understandingly. "We've all been there. Listen, a bunch of us meet up for coffee every Sunday afternoon. It's a great place to talk, share experiences, or just hang out in a chill environment. You should come by sometime if you're interested." She scribbled down an address and time on a napkin, handing it to Greta with another warm smile. "No pressure, of course, but if you decide to come, we'd love to have you." As Zoe moved away to rejoin her friends, Greta turned to Miguel, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Did that really just happen? Miguel grinned, slinging an arm around her shoulders. "It really did. See, I told you this would be good for you." The rest of the night passed in a blur of music, laughter, and a growing sense of belonging. By the time Miguel drove Greta home, she felt like a different person, more confident, more herself than she'd ever been in public before. Standing outside her apartment, Greta turned to Miguel. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I don't know where I'd be without you." Miguel pulled her into a hug. "That's what friends are for, Greta. I'm just glad to see you happy." As Greta watched Miguel drive away, she felt a sense of possibility she'd never experienced before. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but for the first time she felt truly hopeful about the future. The next morning, Greta woke up feeling different. The events of the previous night had shifted something fundamental within her. As she went through her morning routine, she found herself gravitating towards the feminine clothes in her closet without the usual hesitation or fear. Standing in front of the mirror, Greta studied her reflection. The person looking back at her was still a work in progress, a blend of masculine and feminine features, but she no longer felt the need to hide or apologize for who she was becoming. With a deep breath, Greta made a decision. It was time to stop living a double life. She couldn't keep pretending to be someone she wasn't, not at work, not with her family, not anywhere. The first step, she decided, would be work. The thought of coming out to her colleagues filled her with anxiety, but she knew it was necessary. She couldn't keep withdrawing and hiding. It wasn't fair to herself or to her coworkers. Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.